we start with the Times, Steve.
Yep, headline is, I'm proof that Britain isn't racist. Not my words, the words of Rishi Sunak, who's proved... Well, it says here he wants to take the heat out of the row over Islamophobia. Well, as a well-known Islamist, wait a minute, maybe there's a bit of gap in the logic on this one. But, I mean, he's done well for himself. Both financially, both in terms of the career and marriedly. But I suppose it makes us circle back over to the class issue. If you've got a lot of money, you go to a good school, you can do well in this country. So maybe the problems are actually more about how poor people have to struggle.
I wrote at some length about this, and to be honest, I was disappointed that I didn't manage to perceptively shift the national conversation. But a couple of years ago, yes, when to see To Kill a Mockingbird, and there was an attempt in the programme to tie that story to the death of George Floyd, which had happened about 6 months earlier. And I was just annoyed with it, because exactly for what you say, the dividing lines in this country always boil down to money. It used to be class which was distinguishable from money, of course, to an extent. You could be a financially distressed aristocrat and still have a higher social standing than a well-off, nouveau riche or whatever.
That's probably still true, but
yes,
the nouveau riche are doing pretty well for themselves now.
Absolutely. You can insulate yourself from the worst of it, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the main thing I took from this. This is about Rishi Sunak, trying to sort of quell the fires of this Lee Anderson issue by talking about racism and saying, we're not a racist country and so on. And Sadiq Khan has just come out and done a bit on Channel 4. He's saying there's no firm condemnation of this from the Prime Minister. So he's obsessed with getting this apology that Lee Anderson says he won't give. And Sunak's just sort of in the middle talking about racism. Even that statement he released in the second paragraph, he was already talking about racism. Never used the word Islam or Islamic, even though MPs have been threatened. He talked about terror. He talked about extremism. Then he said, I'm proof that this country is not racist, and all this kind of stuff. It's this weird kind of diversion.
And the feeling is, we coined a phrase actually on Twitter recently, me and a small gang in a DM chat, which is escape squirrel, yes, as in scapegoat, but it's like trying to find a distraction on which to focus. And the idea that, of course, Lee Anderson presents a greater threat to national security, peace and calm on the streets than what we've actually seen for the last goodness knows how many Saturdays, and being projected onto the side of the Houses of Parliament and so on, is a classic example of that.
I'm not sure if we're also covering it later in the show, but may as well say it now. Lee Anderson, this thing about whether he apologised or not, he put out this initial statement on X, so it's confusing to me, where it went, Lee Anderson MP said, even though it was on Lee Anderson's X account, following a call with the chief whip, blah, 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 and it ended by saying, I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. So there he seemed to give into this notion of Islamophobia, but tonight on GBNews, he's just clearly said he doesn't understand the term Islamophobia. It's a blasphemy law, and it should be separate from, it's separate race and religion, which is what Khan is trying to not do.
Absolutely. It is ridiculous, obviously, to claim that any criticism of Islam is racist. There are, apart from anything else, something like 2 billion Muslims around the world now who are absolutely, literally, of very distinct races. Indonesia is Muslim, and they have no kinship, I mean, I'm not saying you could sometimes use these things. Of course, the trouble is with anti-Semitism, that traditionally is a murky area, insofar as the Nazis were not interested whether you were a practising Jew, it was whether you were
racially.
a Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not the same. And this attempt to conflate them is very dangerous. Khan keeps doing it. Christopher Hitchens said years ago in this video that I've shared on X that's sort of gone viral again, he said, they'll introduce this word as if it's an accusation of race, hate or bigotry, rather than merely the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. That doesn't mean you have to agree with what he said about Islam, but you do have to agree, if you're a good faith actor, that it is not racism.
Correct. I absolutely agree. That's that one tied up neatly. Hopefully we won't hear any more of that nonsense.